Hello everyone and welcome to my new video about reorganizing stuff in uRTS. It has been a long time since I posted previous videos, but in this video it took me about a month to develop this simplification things to better organize how uRTS is being set up. So here we firstly see that instead of many objects, many game objects, there is just one game object left, which is uRTS. If we open it up, we can see that there are just a few other game objects here. And there are basically four main things here. The RTS, which is the main thing, the core. Then there is UI, and then there is this, if you have a star project, this setup going now into this thing. Now this thing is being set in a way that it would be easy to drag and drop from one project to another. The idea all of this is to simplify the pipeline, that you wouldn't need to worry about order, how to compile, in which way to compile, which script to compile first, which one to compile next, and so on. So now you can just drag and drop into your project with uRTS and start looking from that point. It may happen that not everything may work immediately when you drag and drop, but once you go through these things and recompile them, it should start working. So let's go ahead and see how it looks like now. Firstly, the main thing is RTS, with RTS compiler, which is the main component, as the previously have been the old stuff, which actually compiles all prefabs and setup links. However, I changed a lot in my scripting things. So if you open up one of these scripts, for example, RTS master or something, you could immediately find out that all these different things like scores, battle system, economy, diplomacy, or whatsoever, they are no longer having links to this RTS master. Instead of that, I started to use singletons and setting them up on awake. So if I go ahead, let's say to scores, I can immediately see that various public static scores active, and there was this previously where it was accessing all other scripts. For example, if I want to check something for diplomacy in my scores, I no longer need to go through RTS master, but I can just call it like something like diplomacy dot active. So each of these scripts has this public static, then script name and active, so I can access them through any of these scripts. So firstly, to set this up properly, I'm using two functions. I'm using awake and I'm using start. In awake function, I am setting up all these active singletons. So is it scores, is it diplomacy, is it a battle system? They all have these active things now being set in awake. When start function happens, it sets up everything what is inside the script, and then in update and coroutines, there are and other functions which are accessing other scripts. Let's say in my scores I want to check in battle system something, or otherwise from battle system I want to check if in scores something is happening for my units. I want to take a decision. So I do no longer need to access through RTSM. I can access directly here to let's say scores.active and so on. There are plenty of these things written in all these scripts, and this is the major change of how it looks like. So yes, this was a very big update recently. The next thing, which probably didn't change a lot, is this terrain generator. So it also has the same active thing right here, and there is still this RTSM, but it is local, it is private, what means that no other scripts accessing anything through RTSM here, and there is no need to set up. So you can, for example, from battle system, if you want to check hates or something, to trigger here on generate terrain, you can just call generate terrain dot active, and then access any of these public properties here, or public functions which you have here. So generate terrain basically it didn't change a lot, but basically this reference mapping has been set in just in a better way. Another big thing is UI, which I remade it from scratch. Basically now UI holds several more things, and it became easier to develop it. It no longer compiles from RTS compiler, and is instead a prefab, which can be used in a very good way, because you can now adjust your buttons and everything just by going inside the prefab and modifying actually the UI elements inside. So let's say if we want to set up this button, yes, if we let's say want to expand it, we can just go inside main canvas and find full screen button, and if I just click on this thing, I could just change this by just moving these things around. And I can also move anchors around. So so if anchors are pointing on these points, the element is being scaled in a correct way. And let's say I move it like here. If I click play, I should be able to see very similar thing in the game mode, just like that. And I see it like I said, it's stretched out like that. So now you just can just drag all these components by hand without any worrying how to set up in RTS compiler or anything like that. If I bring it back, I can see the button is like in a regular way, which is in the which is like it's supposed to be here. So that was a very big update. I hope it will help you to organize RTS stuff in a much better way. And another thing, as I said, I made a possible in a way to drag and drop prefabs. So if you go, let's say in assets, uRTS, prefabs, you would find now UI and uRTS prefabs, which are just, I just dragged UI here and this big one, uRTS here. So they are now saved in prefabs. And yes, and so basically let's go ahead and take a look what happens if I open up a new scene without nothing, and I just drag my prefabs and UIs in the scene. How easy is to set it up now. So file, new scene. Okay, I don't want to save this one up. So I have here very basic default scene now. As I have all lighting and other things, I don't need anything from here. I don't need camera or directional light. So I can just remove everything and keep it up as it is. If I just drag in this uRTS, it should do everything. So let's go ahead and drag it up. And here is the magic. I have my UI, I have my camera, and I have everything else. Now to work it properly, I don't know if it works properly, but I usually do break prefab instance that it wouldn't be linked anymore with the prefab, and instead that it would be just on its own on the scene. The next thing we noticed very quickly is that not everything is being set. It's because we need to refresh it a little bit. So if I go ahead in the, let's say, I basically could just recompile these things up. So if I go terrain generator, clean up and generate it again, it will start to generate it. So it's being generated, and yes, that's basically it. Another thing which is currently visible, I can see that there is no fog anymore. I can see as far as my eye sees all over this huge terrain, which is I don't think it is very practical to use like that, maybe or maybe not, but it's it just looks nicer if I have my terrain being set with fog. Or you can use it like that. It's up to you. Another thing is that lighting doesn't work as it worked before. Which when I starting a new scene and I take a look at lighting, I could see that there is being used this environment lighting, pre-computed and other things, which are kind of it might be good on some projects, but I actually didn't find them out very helpful, at least in my case. They are computationally heavy, and I just don't like to use them a lot. I like better to spend computing power in other things like bigger terrains or something like that. So let's go ahead and untick everything to stop baking up things and just use static light. Now for ambient source, it's by default used skybox. but I find out it's probably will be pretty dark, so you may need to set up it in a bit better way. But let's just go ahead and click to start to see what happens if there are errors or not, because we didn't check anything. So there seems to be some errors. It might be that RTS compiler needs to be set it up again. So I can just click and just recompile it, clean up, generate, and everything should be working from now. So here we are. Lighting has changed somehow. A little bit. So yes, it's pretty dark. We need to set up environmental lighting, and of course the sun is a bit different from here. Yes, but that's basically it. It is now working properly, and we can see that we can start building up everything from scratch, and also move around and so on. So it works very nicely, just like that. But as I said, there is no fog at the moment, so it looks kind of empty scene, and I can see the edges, which is not always the best looking thing here. So that's basically it. You can see how easily it is to set now all these things, all these just by dragging and dropping the prefab and so on. This UI prefab can be particularly useful if you work on the default scene and you just don't want to change everything like lighting, or like terrain things, or anything in default setup, but you want to use just your own UI or something, or just to modify UI. You will always have this prefab which you can drag and drop, and you can always find it useful. However, UI is also kind of linked to RTS, because there are a lot of scripts which are accessing RTS system. For example, when building castle, we can see that button appears and disappears from the menus, and it's basically just because of the better way to present for the player that if I spawn a castle, I don't need the second castle to be spawned or something like that. So it kind of checks in RTS if there is spawned castle or not, and there are many other links which are being checked, but now it doesn't check through RTS master. It checks directly on the given scripts. So it can be checking something on diplomacy, it can be checking on economy, or something what is actually needed to be checked. So I hope you will like this new updates, and hope you will get along it. It's basically worthwhile to just try to do some crazy stuff like drag and drop prefabs and see what happens in uRTS, and I'm quite sure you will find it out in a better way than before. So again, thanks for watching and see you next time. To this RTS master. Instead of that, I started to use singletons and setting them up on awake. So if I go ahead, let's say to scores, I can immediately see that various public static scores active, and there was this previously where it was accessing all other scripts. For example, if I want to check something for diplomacy in my scores, I no longer need to go through RTS master, but I is the main component as the previously have been the old stuff which actually compiles all prefabs and setup links. However, I changed a lot in my scripting things. So if you open up one of these scripts, for example, RTS master or something, you could immediately find out that all these different things like scores, battle system, economy, diplomacy, or whatsoever, they are no longer having links that were just a few other game objects here. And there are basically four main things here. The RTS, which is the main thing, the core. Then there is UI, and then there is this, if you have a star project, where this setup going now into this thing. Now this thing is being set in a way that it would be easy to drag and drop from one project to another. The idea all of this is to simplify the pipeline, that you wouldn't need to worry about order, how to compile, in which way to compile, which script to compile first, which one to compile next, and so on. So now you can just drag and drop into your project with uRTS and start looking from that point. It may happen that not everything may work immediately when you drag and drop, but once you go through these things and recompile them, it should start working. So let's go ahead and see how it looks like now. Firstly, the main thing is RTS, with this RTS compiler, which is hello everyone, and welcome to my new video about reorganizing stuff in uRTS. It has been a long time since I posted previous videos, but in this video it took me about a month to develop these simplification things, to better organize how uRTS is being set up. So here we firstly see that instead of many objects, many game objects, there is just one game object left, which is uRTS. If we open it up, we can see